BBOR, Black Box, online radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, I had mentioned that there were going to be a few mini uploads on this channel from time to time. On some days, we would put out a smaller upload. And today we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about Ray Bradbury, something that I didn't think that I would have mentioned because this is mostly a true crime channel, but I have the book Farewell Summer here by Ray Bradbury, and first I would just like to read one thing. This is from page 109. A fine time to tell me. I'm glad I didn't think of it. The worst thing is never to grow up. I see it all around. I see every child in every house. Look there. That's Leonora's house. Poor woman. And here's where those old maids live, in their green machine. Children. Children without love. And over there, take a look. That's the ravine. The lonely one. There's a life for you. There's a child in a man's body. That's the ticket. You could make lonely ones of them, given time and patience. Lonely ones of them all. You use the wrong strategy. Don't force people to grow. Baby them. Teach them to nurse their little patches of hate and prejudice. If you wanted them unhappy, how much better to say, revolt, I'm with you, charge, ignorance, I'm for you, down with the slob and the swine forever. Don't rub it in. I don't hate them anymore. Once again, that's an excerpt, and that's from Ray Bradbury's 2006 book, Farewell Summer. The reason why I wanted to talk about this today is this is a sequel to the book, The Dandelion Wine, that he had written previously. And earlier, we had been talking about John Wayne Gacy on the main upload today on this channel, and I thought it was kind of coincidental that I came across that one because the lonely one was a character in Dandelion Wine who was a serial killer in this small town. And I just thought that, after thinking about John Wayne Gacy, I kind of connected with that part of the story, and I was like, oh, wow, I never really put too much together. And when people think about Ray Bradbury, of course, they might think about Fahrenheit 451, they might think about science fiction, and of course, Dandelion Wine and Farewell Summer. But just to kind of give a very nice introduction to the lonely one, I mean, perhaps better than I could ever articulate, we also have this from the internet. The serial killer known as the Lonely One is a major character in Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine, even though we never directly see him. Or do we? ? Nobody knows for sure whether or not that's the body that they haul out of Lavinia Nebbs's house. That's another character. Anyway, despite the sketchiness of this figure, he both literally and figuratively represents the concept of death. The Lonely One has no small job in Dandelion Wine, for he represents death itself. And the night that one character goes missing, his mother says, "The lonely one's around, killing people, no one's safe. You never know when the lonely one will turn up." And I mentioned we had been talking about, John Wayne Gacy, and he was the killer clown. He was a guy that would dress up as a clown for charitable events, and he was all into, hosting, parties in the neighborhood, and he was sort of like an admired member of the community, despite his criminal record. And this part here in Farewell Summer really got me just sort of thinking about that, this whole concept of to provide a little bit of context. They're talking about how people do not have love in their lives, about how people are kind of missing something. And I think that we've had a few discussions about serial killers on this channel as well, and I thought in poetic terms, Ray Bradbury really captured something probably way better than I could ever emphasize, and it's the concept of acceptance. Back when we were discussing some things with serial killers, we said, the destructive individual really wants to be accepted. They want acceptance and approval. I also say that because I mentioned another writer named Dylan Volk who said that, there's kind of like a myth that men only care about sex, that's guys only care about one thing, that sort of stuff. He sort of said that men use things like affection and compassion as forms of approval from women, and he said that is a good thing. And then, when you sort of see this stuff here talking about how you could make lonely ones out of them all, and just about, being the child in the man's body, it's like you're still the child that just wants love and acceptance and approval. But, people like John Wayne Gacy were abused. Countless individuals were abused. I mean, like, no matter which serial killer you'd like to highlight, whether it would be somebody like Michael Bruce Ross or somebody like Robert Christian Hansen, any serial killer that you could find, you're probably going to find some sort of abuse or mistreatment. Or especially if you're going to be looking at some other examples of things like bullying. I mean, some serial killers are not actually abused by their parents. It also comes from things to do with bullying, and most notably, rejection. They feel rejected from something. And that's kind of a big thing that I wanted to talk about for a long time, and I've mentioned it in a variety of uploads. Rejection from society is kind of its own separate mental awareness issue. So people are kind of striving toward acceptance and approval, but then because of the abuse that they have suffered, they have they just feel that they are unworthy of it. So they turn to destruction because they think that that's all they deserve. And it's like, those are the little patches of hate and prejudice. And it's like, it's just, you really could have instead kind of nurture the good parts of somebody and then just try and make them somewhat stronger. It's like, but what a lot of people try to do is they try to use force as opposed to nurturing. It says, teach them to nurse their little patches of hate and prejudice, meaning that sort of not trying to be too forceful, not trying to be too demanding, and definitely, most notably, not trying to be tyrannical. There's a very interesting discussion that I heard. They were talking about a book by Eric Neumann called The Good Mother. I believe that's the title, and I haven't read it. I was just watching like a discussion about it online, and they mentioned something about how parents can kind of function on a spectrum of benevolence and tyranny. Like benevolence, I mean, you guys know what those things are, so don't really have to explain what benevolence or tyranny is, but what they're sort of saying, and that, or at least my takeaway from this is, from what Ray Bradbury's like sentiment that he's trying to convey is, share this type of benevolence toward the kind of broken parts of somebody, as opposed to using something tyrannical, because it's that type of tyrannical and destructive behavior that allows a greater cycle of destruction to propagate and to expand and to become more out of control. And then you definitely see that with people who have been abused. The abused abuse. That's the famous line. The cycle of destructive behaviors. They just recreate that. They just make it gets worse and worse and worse, to the point where people become serial killers. They become mass shooters. In almost all cases, there is some form of physical abuse or sexual abuse, or even just emotional and psychological abuse. That can be done verbally, or as just kind of when anything to make somebody feel rejected from society. But what he's really trying to focus on here, and once again, this is just my kind of response to the text, is that many children are not loved in the world. They do not feel love. They feel this type of rejection, and it is something that can be improved upon. And the way that you go about it is benevolence. The way you would go about it is like kindness, charity. You would go about this in sort of emotional support, and not using an overbearing measure of force on somebody, not using some sort of tyrannical thing. Hey, snap out of it, you freak. The way that so many of our parents talk to us. My father was definitely more of the snap out of it freak type. Yeah, he might have said that a few times, drawing on some personal experience there. But I just think it's also very interesting that he would title the serial killer The Lonely One, because not only representing death itself, but when you think about it, someone who is rejected from society, the cycle of abuse, they really want to achieve that kind of goal of love, but then they deviate from that pattern and end up in the cycle of destructive behaviors because they feel too broken to get out toward the ideal of love and kindness and, well, anything associated with goodness and humanity. But you do see this in other kind of other sort of serial killers as well, like kind of just the fascination with like perhaps children and youth and such, as disgusting as that sounds. But I really thought about it, because we were covering John Wayne Gacy lately, and he was just such a kind of silly person, when you see him in the clown makeup, and it's like, oh, Pogo the Clown, holy shit, and it's like, you can just sort of see this type of behavior kind of just sort of replicated, and it's definitely just felt like a very strong parallel to what Ray Bradbury was talking about in this in these couple paragraphs here. I first found out about this book because of Dandelion Wine. We had to read it when I was in the 8th grade. It was a school assignment, but I didn't comprehend it at the time. I mean, it wasn't until some people really explained a lot of the things I didn't comprehend. It's all about symbology and metaphors. I would definitely recommend it to people who are somewhat older. Past your 20s, because I think you can really kind of grasp all how the different metaphors represent life, because I was like going through some of that stuff again, and my teacher told me that he was planning to write another book called The End of Summer. This was back in maybe 2001. Actually, it was 2001 because I was in the 8th grade when September 11th happened, of course, September 11th, 2001. And she said he was going to write another book called The End of Summer, and he was still alive, and he had been planning to do it for a long time. He actually titled it Farewell Summer, which came out in 2006, the thing that I'm holding now. And, overall, I just thought that he kind of did a very poetic way of covering some of the material that we had mentioned on this channel before. And I found one of my old serial killer uploads that we had done on BBOR, and I was like, I just wanted to go back through that and listen to, like, is all of this stuff lining up? And maybe I'm completely far out and I've completely missed the mark, or maybe I'm kind of connecting some dots that aren't there. That's always possible. And one of the biggest things is, yes, we kind of give our feeling about what the writer is trying to say, but unless you're sitting down with the writer or somebody who knows the writer personally and knows exactly why he intended that metaphor to be that metaphor, or it's not 100% blatant, there's always a chance it could mean something different, Samuel Beckett was the absolute master of that, and he just kind of like kept all of his secrets because he didn't want everyone to know all the symbology and such. And but anyway, what do you think about serial killers, and what do you think about this aspect of rejection of society, and about how children are lacking love, and just even how the concept of the lonely one is the serial killer, someone who is not loved? What do you think about anything that we've said so far on this upload? And I would love to hear from you, and that's our mini upload for the day. Until next time.